Welcome to episode 82 of the Talking Friars podcast. Ben Fadden here. Today, talking to you on this Christmas week about the Padres coaching staff. Again, obviously, with the Major League Baseball lockout, there's not a whole lot to talk about. The players can't speak to the coaches. Coaches can't speak to the players. Just the organization as a whole can't really communicate. So there's literally no news Major League Baseball wise, except for a few minor league deals. Buck Showalter having his, introductory press conference with the Mets as the new manager there. So the only real news that the Padres can have is the coaching staff. And so that's what we're kind of here to talk about today. And then we'll finish it off with my number one wish on my Christmas Padres wish list for the rest of this offseason when the lockout concludes. But I want to start with the coaching staff. This past week, the coaching staff was announced, the full coaching staff. It had kind of been leaked, most of the names. Obviously, Bob Melvin was official, with the manager press conference and all that. Ruben Niebla, obviously. But there was more names leaked, and the Padres officially announced all those names, had a press conference about it this week. And so I want to discuss that, kind of give you more background on what those guys are, who they are, their backgrounds and all that, because it wasn't really, it's not totally known who these guys are to the, just the casual everyday fan just the casual fan that doesn't follow the team every day. So that's kind of what I want to get into today. So to start out, again, the announcement, the Padres coaching staff announced Bob Melvin is the manager, obviously, was with a decade with the Oakland A's. I mean, my number one, what I wanted, with this, whole manager search going in was, Bruce Bochy was kind of like that far out, not going to get him name. But I think that Bob Melvin is like, he might even be better than Bruce Bochy. I know Bruce Bochy's a Hall of Fame manager and Bob Melvin isn't yet. But I think that, Bruce Bochy's been out of the game for a few years. Well, Bob Melvin, he was leading the Oakland A's who has limited resources, not as much talent as the Padres do on paper, to the postseason year in, year out. He's, heavily involved with analytics in that front office in Oakland, and so he can transition over to San Diego and be a good fit there. He's gonna have a better roster because they just have more money to spend than what Oakland had. So if he can succeed, get the A's to the playoffs year in and year out in Oakland, I think he can do that with the Padres with a better roster. And for me, yeah, I know most Padres fans might want to be glass half empty, but you can't. I'm sorry, I just can't say that. I can't realistically say that all those injuries, all that bad stuff that happened last year, I can't say that that's going to happen again this year. I can't say that Tatis is going to have that many days hurt, not in the lineup as he did last year. I'm not going to say, I'm reluctant to say it with Bob Melvin as the manager. And this is a good thing that there's going to be another clubhouse blow up like there was last year with Tingler as the manager. I can't say that again, the Padres, rotation is going to be, there's only going to be one starting pitcher who's healthy the whole year. I just don't see that happening again. So I think that Bob Melvin's in a really good spot, that this team on paper will be able to make the postseason next year and live up to the expectations to some degree, unlike last year. Last year, obviously, was the total opposite. The Padres did not live up to expectations, and they did not obviously make the playoffs. So, but moving back to the coaching staff, Bob Melvin, obviously the manager, and his bench coach will be Ryan Christensen, hitting coach Michael Bedar, pitching coach, as discussed earlier a little bit, Ruben Niebla comes over from Cleveland, third base coach Matt Williams, first base coach David Macias, bullpen coach Ben Fritz, catching coach Francisco Cervelli, bullpen catcher Roberto Andrade, quality control coach Ryan Flaherty. He was with the coaching staff with Tingler, and game planning and coaching assistant Peter Somerville. He was also with Tingler's coaching staff. And then Ben Fritz will also be in the bullpen. He was also with Jay Singler's coaching staff. He took over for Larry Rothschild as the interim pitching coach when Rothschild was fired after all the pitching injuries and the pitching struggles. But obviously that ended up, not really working out because injuries continue to happen. The pitching wasn't great. I think there were some stats where the pitching was actually worse once Rothschild left. So it wasn't Rothschild being the scapegoat there. That didn't even work out. Obviously, Tingler ended up losing his job anyway. But just I wanted to break down kind of these announcements. Brian Price as well, former Reds manager. I thought he would probably fit as a good pitching coach, but they obviously went the younger route, wanted to communicate better with the Ryan Weathers and the Chris Paddocks, the Mackenzie Gores of the world, Adrian Morhone. So they're having Brian Price work with the front office. He's going to be a senior advisor to the coaching staff. So those are the names. Just kind of breaking it down more because I know a lot of these names, maybe all these names, except a couple because they're former players that some casual fans just might not know. Ryan Christensen for Bob Melvin. He under Bob Melvin, I should say, he served as his bench coach in Oakland for the last few years. So you can't. Obviously, we don't know Ryan Christensen much, so if you hear anyone saying, "Oh, I don't like the Ryan Christensen hire. They could have done better. They could have brought in a Phil Nevin or something." You don't believe them because they don't know who Ryan Christensen is. We don't even know. Probably some A's fans don't even know, really. I mean, they know more than us, but I think that Ryan Christensen, as a bench coach, you're not going to know a whole lot about him. He's not the one that's speaking to the media twice a day for 162 games in a season, unless Bob Melvin gets ejected. But what I like about this hire is that he and Melvin obviously have a previous relationship. They have a bond. They know how to communicate well. They know with each other. They know, obviously, how things go in terms of communication and strategy in games, what role Christensen needs to fill for Melvin in terms of matchups, informing him on if this reliever comes into the game, what pinch hitters are we using, or vice versa. If the other team uses, Albert Pujols off the bench, what reliever are we using? Just stuff like that. Obviously, all the coaches, most coaches will be involved in that process, but in pregame meetings, communication with Melvin, just they know their role. So there's not going to be any transition. And there's no need to say, oh, okay, if they're struggling early on, well, we just need more time with the coaching staff to gel. The rest of it maybe, but in terms of Christensen and Melvin, there isn't going to be a need for that. So talk about a seamless transition. You got to love that if you're a Padres fan. Hitting coach Michael Bradar, I did want to go over that a little bit. Coming over from the Giants, he was a hitting coordinator. He is really he's more of a younger age. So he, like Ruben Niebla came over from Cleveland. Both of them, the pitching coach and hitting coach, Bradar is the hitting coach, Niebla is the pitching coach. They're both younger. And I think that was definitely something that the Padres wanted. I think that's probably something that Preller went into this hiring process with that thought process of, I want younger pitching and hitting coaches because the older type didn't work, at least with Larry Rothschild. Now, Darren Balsley, that worked, right? That was better than what Rothschild produced. And I don't think there was any need to shake up the pitching coach position with Balsley, to be quite honest, unless there was something that we don't know about that happened, internally, that there was just no reason to bring him back. But Balsley seemed like he knew what he was doing, and now he's not even in the organization the last time I checked. So, but in terms of moving forward, I think that why, they hire these guys, maybe not too well-known names, Niebla from Cleveland. I think part of that was because there are a lot of Cleveland guys in this, Padres pitching, roster. You got Mike Clevenger coming over from Cleveland. I think that's a big thing, being able to communicate with him because he can be an X factor for this rotation. He was hurt last year, obviously, hurt at the end of 2020 after they acquired him, couldn't throw that breaking ball in the postseason. So that pretty much ended the Padres' postseason hopes there in that NLDS against the Dodgers when he and Lamet went down. But I think with Niebla's track record of developing guys, Trevor Bauer, Corey Kluber, Cal Quantrill, who came over from San Diego to Cleveland, Mike Clevenger, who else? Andrew Miller who had success and changed how relievers are used in some ways. How Josh Hader's being used nowadays, and how your closer is just becoming a high leverage reliever instead of just a specifically just closer type role. So he has a track record of developing guys. Carlos Carrasco is another one. Shane Bieber is another one. They just who won the pitching Triple Crown in 2020, I think. He has a track record of being able to communicate with the younger guys, being able to develop those guys, and I think that's crucial. And I think that's a real reason. Same with the hitting coach, Michael Bedard coming over from San Francisco, being able to communicate. You're a younger age than other guys that the Padres have hired in the past, and so I think Bedard and Niebla can use that to their advantage to communicate with the younger players, maybe have better terminology in terms of the analytics, or it's just maybe just changing it up. If the older guy didn't work, then I guess just try bringing in the younger guy, someone who's just better versed maybe in analytics. I don't want to stereotype ages because, Buck Showalter just hired with the Mets. He knows what he's doing. He worked at MLB Network. He's generated a new thought process and the way that he thinks and what his thoughts on analytics. He wishes he had it. I heard in a radio interview he did. He wishes he had an analytics staff in Baltimore that they didn't have when he was there. So he's opened his mind. So I think older guys can open their mind too. Obviously, Bob Melvin isn't the youngest manager in the league, and he uses analytics all the time in Oakland and is going to use it in San Diego. So I don't want to stereotype ages, but I think going with a younger guy, maybe some of those hitters and the pitchers will, they'll be more attracted to them. I don't know, but it doesn't hurt to go in a younger direction, especially when you do have a veteran manager, veteran third base coach, which I'll get to, a veteran bench coach who have that relationship that they can bounce ideas off of. They're familiar with them, and so they know that, hey, if this younger guy isn't doing it, they can, steer them in the right direction. So that's kind of my thoughts. Again, Bedard, he was with San Francisco as a hitting coordinator, and maybe a part of the reason why they want to get Hosmer. If they don't trade Hosmer, they want to get him and Myers back on the right tracks as veterans, right? Bedard worked in San Francisco, and guess what? Last year, Buster Posey had a great season before he retired. Brandon Bell, a career year. Brandon Crawford had some MVP votes. Those are all veterans who people thought in baseball that those guys were done, right? They thought that those guys were definitely on the back nine of their careers. And guess what? Brandon Crawford got an extension out of it. Brandon Belt got a little less than $19 million qualifying offer out of it. So maybe appealing to that older, more veteran hitter is what the Padres found appealing in Bedard. And I believe he coached at Michigan a little bit. So he does have that experience as well, dealing with much younger players. So just that overall background complementing those two, that's probably appealing to Bob Melvin and the Padres. So obviously all of these, you can't really bang any of these coaching hires right now because we just don't know much about them. And really all that matters is, does the team win, right? Does the offense step up and produce better numbers and drive in more runs than they did last year, right? Does the pitching staff stay healthier? Do they produce more? Does Blake Snell, can he contribute and pitch to hit the level that he pitched last month of the year before he got hurt with the groin injury? Can he do that the whole year? Can Mike Clevenger stay healthy and pitch well the whole year? Just those question marks like that. All that matters is the on-field results. So that's how we're going to judge the coaching staff at the end of the day. So Bedard, Niebla, hitting coach, pitching coach, respectively. Moving to Matt Williams, third base coach. He was, again, that's another connection. So with the A's, Christensen, and Melvin, they were with the Oakland A's those last few years there. Matt Williams didn't really work out managing wise. I believe he tried managing in Japan or in Korea, one of the two. That didn't really work out, but he went back to the A's to manage with Melvin as a third base coach. And I think that, that's got to be a positive. The Padres miss Glenn Hoffman, and, I don't want to, I don't want to, again, I don't want to, bang Bobby Dickerson, but he definitely contributed to that clubhouse, uh, failure last year, if you will, for a lack of a better term or saying. Uh, trying to talk to Tatis. Tatis always didn't want to listen to him. He was kind of more of a hardcore coach instead of, a buddy with the player. And maybe Matt Williams, as a former player, as a former manager, kind of knowing how players operate. Obviously, he had success. Marcus Semien had success in Oakland. Obviously, Matt Chapman, Matt Olson. You never hear of any clubhouse, uh, you know, blow-ups with the A's, in that coaching staff with Melvin and Christensen and Williams. So, and Williams, I think, is something that I really like about this as well, is that no one wants, but I don't really hear many people mentioning as well. They obviously mentioned the Oakland connection, like I mentioned, but the fact that he was a former manager as well. He managed that Bryce Harper Washington Nationals team and with Jason Worth and Ryan Zimmerman in his prime to the playoffs. Now, I know that they didn't win any playoff series, but I remember vividly them hanging in there with the Giants, who ended up winning the World Series later that year, in those 18 inning games in the playoffs. And so he has playoff postseason experience. So I think that can only help the Padres and help Bob Melvin. And obviously, like I mentioned, Christensen, Melvin, they all have how they have that process of how they do things the last few years. They've had that same process. So again, that's talk about that seamless transition, that seamless way of how they're going to run spring training, which is something that no one talks about. There's 4 ways that you manage a ball club, right? Spring training, regular season, September call-ups, and the postseason. And so they've done that for a few years now. So they know what they're doing. They know how they run them those different ways. So I think that's a big plus for the Padres coaching staff, that they do have some of that chemistry. So I really like that Matt Williams hire as the third base coach. And I think he's, nothing against Bobby Dickerson, but I really like that Matt Williams hire as the third base coach. And I think that'll turn out well, replacing Glenn Hoffman, who retired before last season. David Macias, first base coach. This was an interesting one. He coached at Vanderbilt. He recently went to Eastern Carolina there, working with the outfield, and he'll work with the outfield of the Padres. He's an interesting one. Obviously, you're not, like I mentioned, we can't say, oh, this was a bad hire or whatever. I like Wayne Kirby. I think players liked Wayne Kirby. He really helped out Tatis transition to the outfield. But I think Bob Melvin wanted his own guys and kind of a unique approach and all that. And so they went in a different direction. And David Macias, again, he's more of a younger, I think, connecting with that younger audience, right? He played minor league ball, I believe, with the Cubs. He has professional baseball playing experience, and I think being able to communicate with the younger players, right? The game's getting younger and younger. There's no like stereotypical, you have to play 5-6 years in the minors before you get called up. That's not the way it is. If you're ready, they're going to call you up because teams want to win, and competition's big. It's getting better and better, and so they want to win. They want you in the big leagues if you can help contribute. So I think having a younger guy like that will help. Someone that's communicated with college players that are just of that younger age, younger mentality, that are dealing with analytics at the college level. I think, and maybe he can help transition them from minor leagues to the big leagues, or from college ball to AA, and help, and with those conversations in spring training and all that. I think that could really help. Now, in terms of first base coach, I mean, obviously we can't really say anything about that because we just don't know who this guy is. And again, the results are going to be on the field. You're not going to just look at David Macias one day and say, oh, no, this was a good hire. It's just going to be judged on wins and losses. Going to be judged, I guess, if he's going to work with the outfield, how the outfield does, how the outfield fielding improves. That's just the way it is. It's going to be based on on-field results. So that's pretty much the way that's how it's going to be judged with all these guys. Again, Ben Fritz, bullpen coach. Like I mentioned earlier, interim pitching coach. We kind of already know about him. Seems well liked in the clubhouse. Obviously, he has to be well liked if he was staying from the Tingler to the Melvin, regime when not many coaches stayed. Wayne Kirby's gone, Bobby Dickerson's gone, Rothschild's obviously gone. The hitting coach is gone, so not many people stayed. So obviously, he had to be liked by the players because we know that communicating with the players, interacting with the players is huge nowadays. You're not just there, on the field. It's about so much more than that. Before games, after games. So obviously he's well liked. So you can't really say much about the Fritz staying when it is really just based on the players. So you can't say, oh, they shouldn't have kept him. Francisco Cervelli is something interesting I wanted to touch on. Catching coach. Obviously playing the big leagues. Unfortunately, his playing career was cut short, by concussions and all that. Dealt with multiple. Played with the Marlins to end his career. Played with the Yankees a little bit. Played with the Pirates most notably. So he has the experience of catching veterans, of catching younger guys. Especially with the Marlins that last year he was there because the Marlins obviously are a rebuilding team. They're going to have a lot of young guys. So being able to communicate there. Jorge Alfaro, who was traded to the Padres, he was a teammate with Alfaro in Miami there. And I think that his experience, he was a good catcher. He's pretty good defensively. He was all right offensively. He's someone that obviously, as a former player, Rod Barajas is good and all, but Cervelli, had something that Barajas didn't, and that was playing experience really recently, like recent playing experience, almost like he's going to be almost like a player coach. Or like, I know he's not playing, but I hope you get my point. Like he was playing really recently with Miami, and now he's transitioning as a coach. And he wants to be a manager one day. I think I remember him saying that to The Athletic a couple of years back. And so if he wants to do that, he's obviously serious about coaching. And so I think this is going to be a really good, at least teaching tool that the Padres can utilize in Cervelli for a Luis Campusano if he doesn't get dealt. Because if they want Campusano to be the catcher of the future, in a young rookie contract, not having to pay him much, obviously with the power, they can refine his defensive skills, which is what needs a lot of work, let's be honest. His approach at the plate looks better, which is good. But obviously, he has a strong arm, but just the defense, commanding a pitching staff, just communication, all of that I think can really improve. And Cervelli was one of the best at it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, if the Padres don't deal Campusano, attach him to a Hosmer deal or something like that. Hopefully this is a really good tool for the Padres. And even if they do deal him, to be quite honest, veteran to veteran talk with Nola and Caratini and Alfaro can only help. Now, I talked about it on a previous podcast, on a trade that I wrote up on GasLandBall.com, kind of a hypothetical with Campusano and Hosmer going to the Red Sox in a deal. I haven't heard that mentioned anywhere, but obviously I mentioned that because right now there's 4 catchers on the roster with Alfaro, Caratini, Nola, and Campusano. And obviously I don't feel like they're going to be carrying 4 catchers on the 26-man roster. Now, if the DH comes into play, maybe you use one of them as a DH, but all 4 of those guys aren't great. Or Campusano has the upside to be a great hitter, but all 4 right now, they're not consistently great hitters. So I don't think you'd use up a DH spot for that. So I think that the most likely scenario is a trade. So that's why I mentioned, if Campusano isn't dealt, that would be a great tool. Roberto Andrade is the next one, the bullpen catcher. He has professional baseball playing experience as well. So I think that what's good is the Padres aren't hiring these, young just players that don't have the experience. They have playing experience, and they know, obviously, the modern day analytics and baseball conversations that go on. So they're not just bringing in guys that have been out of the league for a while, or they didn't play professionally. So just having that advantage of being able to have advice for young players that the Padres have, whether that be in the farm system during spring training or in the bullpen during games. Obviously, as the bullpen catcher, that's not going to be a role that people are going to talk about. We're not going to talk about the bullpen catcher at any time during the season unless there's like an interview or something that comes up about it. But being able to communicate how pitchers are moving, how certain pitches are moving, obviously playing professionally, he probably came up and saw, some pitchers that end up being successful in the major league level, how they prepare, how they pitch, just giving feedback. He was a bullpen catcher with the Pittsburgh Pirates and their organization. So I think that having him, obviously he has that experience of how you're going to do that during games. So I think that's really big. I don't have any huge takeaways on this hiring because it's a bullpen catcher. Like, what at the end of the day, what are we going to say about that? What is anyone going to say about that? But I think that what I can one takeaway I can give to you about it is, I think that it's a positive generally with the coaching staff as a whole, because Bob Melvin and AJ Preller are bringing in guys with big league experience, with experience communicating with older players, with younger players. They brought in guys that have history with Bob Melvin. They also brought in guys that don't have a history of Bob Melvin, but they have a history, with other organizations, and they can bring in things in big league organizations like Michael Bradar and Ruben Niebla, and they can bring in things that they learned there from other pretty smart people like Terry Francona and stuff, Gabe Kapler, Bruce Bochy, guys like that, or from things that he learned at Michigan, like Bradar did. They can bring those insights in and make the Padres coaching staff better. So two more guys, Flaherty and Somerville, they were already with the Padres system. Flaherty, obviously, he's kind of an intriguing one. I'm not going to touch much on Somerville because it's just game planning and coaching assistant. Like, the coaching staff as a whole now in the analytics group is big on the coach planning. So I don't know really how much of a role Peter Somerville plays because I'm not in the clubhouse, not in that coaching staff meetings with the players and all that. But just in terms of Flaherty, I think that he's really liked in the Padres clubhouse, and I think it was a no-brainer to keep him. Obviously, he wasn't the best major league player, but he was obviously there years and years and years, and he has that relationship with Manny Machado, and he's played with some pretty good, successful guys that he can, bring those insights and his experiences at the big league level and share with the younger guys and the older guys and the new coaches on the roster. And he's obviously a familiar face in the organization. And obviously he's a younger coach, obviously, because he's just came off playing in 2014. So he's recently, he's been in the big leagues, obviously with the coaching staff. He was with Tingler, so he has that experience being in San Diego, already having prior relationships with most of the players on the team. And obviously being well-liked. I mean, like I mentioned, it's a players' league right now. Not the NBA. I'm not meaning like roster construction-wise, although, the Max Scherzers of the world, Manny Machado's of the world, maybe they have a voice, who they bring in the roster. But so I don't mean it's a players' league like that. They're like super teams and all that. But I mean, like, being able to communicate with the players and the players liking you is such a huge thing, because if they don't, as we kind of saw with that Bobby Dickerson, that can, with the Bobby Dickerson situation last year, that can be a pretty big negative, because that can lead up to clubhouse disputes, clubhouse frustration, and that just starts a whole down spiral and really big negative effect on the Padres, any big league team for that matter as a whole. So, keeping Flaherty, a guy that obviously it seems like players like, is huge. And I think that, Flaherty, in terms of just the things that I saw in the dugout last year, on camera, on TV, he was always moving around, talking with players, talking with coaches. So very involved is what are my takeaways from Flaherty. So I think, in terms of the coaching staff as a whole, the takeaways, I really like the makeup of this coaching staff. Again, the familiarity Bob Melvin has brought in with Matt Williams as the third base coach and Christensen as the bench coach. I think that's huge. The seamless transition. Those coaches can help fill in other coaches on how Melvin runs things. It just helps the transition. And those are obviously good coaches. I'm not just saying that it's just a seamless transition of bad coaches. They're good coaches as well. Matt Williams has had success in Oakland, former manager experience, and then you combine that with familiarity that they kept guys, right? The Ben Fritzes, the Ryan Flahertys, the Peter Somervilles of the world, and then they brought in guys with recent playing experience, like a Francisco Cervelli, bringing in a Ruben Niebla. I mean, it wasn't playing experience recent, but recent experience having success with a Cleveland organization that is known for developing really young stud pitchers. Dating back to the Corey Klubers, and who was traded obviously from San Diego. That was one of the trades that the Padres regret. And then bringing it most recently to Cal Quantrill, who pitched well, with the Indians at the big league level last year. So I think that the Padres as a whole, whether it was Melvin making having the last say on the choices, or if it was Preller, or if it was 50-50, it's a good makeup of the staff. And what I want to leave you with in terms of the coaching staff, and Bob Melvin kind of just reiterated, this is the first time I'm reading these quotes, but Melvin kind of reiterated what I just said about the coaching staff. He said at the press conference Monday, younger guys, veteran guys, new school mindsets, some traditional old school, mindsets. I think it's a great balance. We took our time. We wanted to get it right in terms of the coaching hirings, is what he's saying. At the end, I think we came up with some really good names and some really good fits for this staff. Yeah, just pretty much reiterating what I was saying there. Just having a balance, creating a balance, perspectives. Again, obviously, familiarity and non-familiarity. But with that non-familiarity comes new voices and new guys that maybe can help this coaching staff improve and help help the players obviously develop better. And that's what's the main thing about the coaching staff: strategy and getting these players to perform better. So in terms of the holdovers, Melvin said there are some holdovers that have the continuity and the resources of knowing our guys. Again, like knowing the players, having those prior relationships that the players like them, the Flahertys of the world. Quote, we also have some new guys. I just think it's a really good mix. Again, that's what the main message is: really good mix of coaches. And so right now, obviously, it's unfair to judge the coaching staff as a whole, because all that matters is what we see on the field. But in terms of the names, their backgrounds, the success that they've had, just the different perspectives that they can be blended together, I think it's a good start to this kind of off season. Obviously, adding with the player additions, with the Luis Garcias of the world, the Robert Suarez's, the Jorge Alfaros. So I think it's a good start to the offseason. And as we transition to what the rest of the offseason holds before we get out of here on this Christmas week, I think, I wanted, obviously Christmas week, I wanted to create kind of a Christmas wish list for the Padres after the lockout ends. And I think, it's a short, maybe that front office says it's a long list, right? But I think that it's a pretty short list if you go into it from a broad sense, in terms, 1, power hitting outfield, 2, rotation depth. I know that, and I don't include the Nick Martinez signing yet because it's not official, so they'll check that box off the list, so it comes even shorter, really. In terms of the rotation depth, it's really just keeping guys healthy, right, next season. Just maybe implementing new things that should have been implemented earlier to keep these guys, the Clevengers, the Lamettes, the Morehomes, the Paddocks, the guys, the Weathers, the guys that got hurt, which was pretty much everyone, keeping them healthy. I think that's the main thing, because if most of them stay healthy, they have a really deep pitching staff. So I think that they didn't bring Melanson back, but oh well, they brought in two relievers that have some upside and they throw upper 90s, right? You brought in Ray Kerr in that trade, who can throw upper 90s, just the control, right? Just that trade, he got Kerr came in to San Diego from Seattle in that Adam Frazier deal earlier this offseason. So they've kind of shored up the bullpen a little bit. They don't have, it was kind of like a 2020 or 2021 situation where they don't really have a firm grasp on who the closer is going to be, but that'll sort that'll sort out during spring training or whatever. So, but I think they've kind of built up more depth in the bullpen, more depth options in the minor league system. But if I could pick one thing on a Christmas wish list, it's getting a power hitting outfielder. I'd rather have Chris Bryant than Nick Castellanos. I was actually a big fan I might favor Bryant over this guy, but in terms of years, in terms of just where they at in their careers, the Padres' needs, Avisail Garcia was really a guy that I really started to fall in love with when I was, researching him. I think that was I think that would have been a brilliant signing. He obviously chose Miami, but I think that would have been a brilliant signing. That obviously didn't happen. I thought they could have got him, 2-3 years, and it would have been cheaper than Castellanos, obviously, and Bryant. But now I think you got to turn your attention to Chris Bryant, bring back Tommy Pham, obviously, on a short, 1-year deal, $5 million or something, for on a outfield depth spot. Obviously, a DH that could obviously be the second thing on my wish list. Obviously, I'm not including trading Hosmer, right? That's a big thing that we want to create more flexibility. So that maybe should be like number one, but I want to bring this Christmas wish list into from a perspective that we're bringing guys in. I'm not talking about bringing guys out. So I'd rather have Bryant. That would be my number one as of right now over Castellanos. Both are great hitters. Castellanos is obviously coming off a better year than Bryant, but I like AJ Preller. I like versatility. He can play third. He can play outfield, all three outfield positions. He's had experience with that. He can probably play other infield positions because of the shifts that have been happening. Shoot, Manning's like a right fielder half the time now. So that's another example of that. So I like Bryant's versatility. Hits for average most of the time. He has power. I know people want to bring up the power of Castellanos, but Bryant does have that. Just go look at his stats, excluding a couple years of his career where he's dealt with some injuries. But I know dealing with Scott Boras is a little bit of a hassle, but I'd rather have Bryant over Castellanos. I just think that's a better bet defensively, versatility-wise. You can do more things with him. And both guys are going to be inserted in the middle of the lineup anyways. I think that Bryant could come at a cheaper price, to be quite honest, because he's not coming off of almost like a career year like Castellanos was with Cincinnati last year. So that's been the episode. Again, episode 82. Thank you so much. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everyone who celebrates Christmas. Any holiday you celebrate. Hopefully this lockout ends. I don't anticipate it to, but keep fingers crossed. I think that February 1st again is a date, that's a long ways away, but that's a date to look at for some urgency to start, because it would be only a couple of weeks away from spring training. And if the Players Association wants spring training to start on time, that'd probably be a good thing to get that deal done sometime around February 1st, so that teams have couple weeks to sign those players and get spring training rolling. Guys know where they're going, renting apartments, knowing where they're going to live, all that stuff. So I think February 1st is a date to watch. Thank you again for listening and watching this episode. We'll be back next week, hopefully with an interview or two. Happy holidays. And until next time, let's go Padres.